Welcome to my full Shadow Reef aka Elite Dungeon 3 guide. So when you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax and enjoy. The Shadow Reef is quite some high level content, which is why I recommend at least 80 plus combat stats if you're going in a group. Unless there's two very high level players, the third person in the group can go with 70 plus stats and gear, but I recommend 80 plus. Having a high prayer level for curses, and a high harbor level for overloads, and a high summoning level for a pack yak or other beast of burden or a steel titan if you're rushing is definitely recommended, but it is not required. Since Elite Dungeons is high level content, I'm going to start by showing you guys some high level setups for melee, ranged and magic. By far melee is the best style to use here and the easiest to use for Elite Dungeons 3. However, you can also use magic, and if you really want to, you can use ranged, but you're better off using melee and magic. For melee, you want your best melee gear and preferably a scythe type weapon, so a Masuda's War Spear, Dragon Rider Lance, Noxious Scythe, etc. and a dual wield switch if you want to do more deeps. Armor I recommend is of course Trimmed Masterwork because it does not degrade in Elite Dungeons and it can save your ass plenty of times if you mess up. Stuff like a Scrimshaw Vampirism can also help you save food and make the dungeon feel much smoother. For ranged, Ascensions with Mechanized Enchompers are your best bet. And of course your Cinderbane gloves for each of the combat styles because monsters inside this dungeon can actually be poisoned. Mage is pretty similar, you just want to use your best magic armor and perk out your gear with Undead Slayer, Crackling, Impatient and perks like that. Undead Slayer is particularly useful in Elite Dungeons 3 because a lot of the monsters are actually undead. Here are some gear setups if you're the third person in the group and you have high level players carrying you around. These are the same gear setups I showed in my Elite Dungeons 3 GP farming guide, which is only farming the first section up to the first boss. However, you can also use these setups if you're in a group with two other high level players, but like said previously, you want to have high level gear and high level weapons because this is high level content and without it, it's not going to be as smooth. You cannot expect to solo the entire dungeon in this gear without a lot of problems, just so you know. On screen now are two inventory examples for Elite Dungeons 3. You want to bring along food and sourdough and brews for tick eating, and if you want to, you can also use blue blubber jellyfish, which are amazing for tick eating as well. You want to bring along weapon poison plus, a replenishment potion or adrenaline potion, super restores or prayer potions depending on your preference, stat boosting potions like overloads or war master potions, an enhanced Excalibur, lucky charms which cost 10,000 engineering tokens each, the Shadow Reef ones of course, which can be bought at the shop, a bladed dive switch if you have the bladed dive ability, ring switches, and in the inventory example to the right, if you're an experienced player, other switches like flanking and lunging for maximum deeps. One thing that is extremely important is the Salve Amulet or the Salve Amulet E, which gives you 20% extra damage and accuracy against the undead, which is extremely useful to switch to when killing the zombies inside the dungeon and when killing Taraket, the second boss of the dungeon. I know this is a melee inventory example, but if you're using magic and range, just be sure to bring along your planted feet switch if you have one. There are a few ways to get there, the first of which is if you do not have the max guild portal or the PVM hard portal in the future, which is hopefully coming, is using your Ring of Kingship and teleporting to Daimamheim aka the Dungeoneering area and then walking there, which will just take you about 30 seconds. The second and probably best way to get there if you're not a max player is by making a group, setting it to the Shadow Reef, readying up, completing the group, and then teleporting there. And if you're a solo player, be sure to leave the group for better rates. If you're in a group, stay in the group and go inside the dungeon. If you do not have the chest upgrade, which costs 750,000 Dungeoneering tokens, you will want to manually toggle your chest to automatically collect loot before you go inside, and every time before you kill a boss to toggle it back on for a 20% chance to double your drops. Then after killing a boss, when you proceed to go to the next section of the dungeon, you want to toggle your chest back to automatically collect all of the loot from the trash mobs. The dungeon consists of 3 different sections. In between sections you have bosses, and the final section, section 3, you have the hardest boss being the Ambassador. The sections are pretty straightforward, but just in case, I'm going to be showing you guys the path you want to take with some free cam top-down footage. Now don't worry, as I'll actually be showing you guys footage and a walkthrough of the entire dungeon with in-game footage as well. From the entrance of the dungeon, you want to take this path to the first boss. Then once you've killed the first boss, you take this path. Then at this path, you have two sections you need to activate. You need to activate two kind of artifacts, which are located to the east and west. Before you can get to these artifacts, you have to kill one necromancer to open the barrier to get to the artifact to activate it. Then you cross the bridge to the next barrier in the middle, which is a very dangerous bridge as you take a lot of typeless damage. More on that later. Just before the second boss, Taraket, you take this path. There will be a bank chest before the boss. Once you've killed Taraket, the second boss, you just go through the path as seen on the video. Then finally you take this path until you jump down, and then you have a straightforward path all the way up to the final boss, the Ambassador. This should give you a general idea of what it's like to run through the dungeon. If you want to skip to a certain section of the guide, there will be timestamps in the description below if you, for example, want to go straight towards the second boss and you're not interested in how to kill the trash mobs and how to open up the barriers until that point. Because I will be going over everything you need to know in this guide. Starting off, you of course want to start the dungeon in normal mode at all times. The first section of the dungeon is actually pretty straightforward. A belated dive switch is extremely useful, and double surge or just surging around will save you a lot of time of running because there's a lot of straight sections where you can belated dive or surge. After the first 4 barriers, you come to a larger section where you can ignore most of the creatures except for the Crassian scouts and cloaked zealots, which you want to kill, which are located close to the barrier. You do not need to kill the sea horrors or the Crassian warriors, which do take up a lot more time if you want to kill them all. The next large area is a group of zombies which you can easily kill, and I suggest you equip your Salve Amulet E if you have it. And there's also a chance of a mini boss called Bossy McBossface to spawn, which does actually have a rare drop worth about 50-60 mil. And the final section before the Crassian Leviathan boss is really easy. You want to kill the zealots first because they summon creatures, and then you pretty much have the barrier open. I suggest you build up your adrenaline to 100%, and if you need to, toggle the chest for a chance of double drops, and you can bank if you really need to. But if you're speedrunning with a Titan and you have high level gear, you probably do not. The boss arena of the Crassian Leviathan is pretty straightforward. If you do not kill him fast enough in a group of 3, duo or solo, he actually moves to the other side, which is why I highlighted the left area with a red box. So you want to build up your adrenaline to 100% and equip your Ring of Vigor if you have it. If you're using melee, you want to Zerk. If you're using magic, you want to use Sunshine. Once you're at the boss, of course. And the same goes for range, depth, swiftness. Use your Adrenaline Potion if you have it. You know, make sure you're overloaded. And stand to the side of the boss. Because at the beginning of the fight, he does this puke attack. If you're using a scythe type weapon, you're actually safe. But if you're melee distance, this can hit around 5,000 plus and can easily KO you if you keep standing in it. Now, because of the nature of this boss's mechanics, you want to stand in the middle of the boss to have the easiest time avoiding the swipe attack, which comes from either the left side to the right or from the right side to the left. If you're using dual wield weapons and you do not have a scythe type weapon, you will have a hard time attacking the boss while running away from the swipe attack. The Crassian Leviathan will do 2 swipe attacks and then do some auto attacks and then switch sides. What you can do is actually use Slaughter before he switches sides to do maximum damage, because then the boss actually moves and you get that extra damage with your Slaughter or Combust or Fragmentation Shot bleeding abilities. Then the next section leading up to section 2 or floor 2 of the dungeon is pretty straightforward except for one little area, which I'll explain in a second. Also, I just want to note that the Undead Slayer perk is extremely useful with the Salve Amulet E against those zombies or undead creatures like the Necromancers in this dungeon. It's a massive damage increase and will make your kills or runs much faster. For this section here, to open up the barrier, you only have to kill this Necromancer I'm attacking right now in the video and the 3 skeletons in front of the barrier, and then you can go inside and go down to floor 2 or section 2 of the dungeon. There will actually be a banking chest right after you go down if you need to stock up on supplies. Now this section is a little different. You actually have to activate 2 artifacts, one to the east and one to the western side. You can only activate these blackstone artifacts after killing the necromancer in front of the barrier. Do not kill the skeletons as it's a waste of time and supplies. Once you've activated both artifacts, if you're solo you have to do both yourself, the barrier for the middle bridge or the barrier leading up to the middle bridge will actually open. This is a dangerous bridge you want to get off of as soon as you can because you take a lot of typeless and ranged damage. This is why you use devotion and ranged prey when killing the sea horrors and the necromancer located on the bridge to open up the barrier. Once you've opened up the barrier, get off that bridge as soon as you can because it's just a supply waste to sit there and take a huge amount of damage. This is probably one of the hardest sections in the dungeon and the only place where high level players will actually struggle against trash mobs. The next part of the dungeon leading up to Taraket is pretty straightforward, and there will be a bank, and you and your buddy or your group can actually keep the trash mobs from attacking you so that you can quickly bank, load up some supplies if you need them. And this is the boss where the Salvamnet E and the Undead Slayer perk and the Undead Slayer ability come in handy, because Taraket is a member of the Undead category. If you're doing Taraket solo, I recommend you kill the big zombie and the small zombie so they do not have stacked up damage, and then kill Taraket, but it will be a very slow kill. If you're in a group of 2, I suggest you only kill the big zombie dude, the corpse carrier, and then kill Taraket and ignore the smaller zombie. And if you're a group of 3, you could potentially just tank both of them, or one person tanks them, and finish off Taraket quite quickly. Now, Taraket is simple in the fact that you only have to pray magic when he's using magic attacks, and when he's in a death swiftness mode, you want to be praying ranged. I'll give some examples of how this looks like on screen. Now, Taraket has a lot of little things you want to know if you want to know everything about the boss. However, the most important things to remember are on screen now. Switch your prayers when needed. Kill the Rift of Undeath straight away unless Taraket is below 40k life points. If you're soloing, you might as well kill it unless your DPS is high enough. The reason I say this is because if you do not kill the Rift, you actually take 7,500 damage per player in your group straight away if it isn't killed within the time. This Rift also summons skeletons that can still be alive if you aren't using as much AoE abilities as you can when you're killing the Rift to kill the skeletons as well. This is why you want to kill the skeletons afterwards as well, because if you do not, each skeleton will heal Taraket 4,000 life points. One more thing that you really want to remember is if Taraket yells your efforts are meaningless, blah 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 blah, or I am the master of death, he will summon a wall of ghosts that does a huge amount of damage and you want to get out of the way of. If you're standing in melee distance, all of your entire team or solo, you can actually walk through Taraket to avoid this attack. Okay, let's quickly go over a kill. As you guys can see, we get ready to use our Zerk rotations or Mutated Barge rotations. We Zerk up, Ring of Vigor, Adrenaline Potion, switch back to your Ring of Death, do as much damage as you can at the beginning of the fight. You want to pray magic, of course, because that's what he uses first, and once he switches to the Death Swiftness attacks, you start using ranged. As you guys can see, he starts flying around to spawn the first bloated zombie guy thingy, which you can build adrenaline on, and once he goes back down and is attackable again, you want to attack Taraket again. However, he spawned a Rift, so you want to kill the Rift first, finish off the skeleton so he can't heal, and then get back on Taraket. However, he goes ahead and flies away and spawns the big corpse carrier, which you do want to kill, because if you do not, the skeletons and the corpse carrier will overwhelm you in duo, or most likely will, and it will just be super annoying. So as you guys can see, he's also using Death Swiftness at the moment, Taraket that is, so we pray ranged. We kill the corpse carrier because it's just a lot of damage and the skeletons are annoying. And from that point on, the fight is pretty straightforward. You just kill the Rifts unless Taraket is very low HP. You tank the small guy. Unless it's solo, you can kill him as well. In a group of trio, you can honestly just ignore him. Just make sure that you kill the skeletons from the Rifts so that Taraket does not heal. And all in all, in duo, this fight isn't that bad. In trio especially isn't, as long as you're paying attention, which you should be doing at all times. Once you've killed Taraket, you just move on north. You kill the mobs for the barrier. Then all you have to do is kill the Kagarian demon, called Girion Demon, whatever, I can't pronounce that, and the barrier will open up. Now in the next room there is a chance of a mini boss spawning that has a chance to drop a very rare item, which is a demonic title scroll, and the mini boss is called Yorger the Deceiver, and he really doesn't make up for much of a challenge. Now, The next section is pretty straightforward. You do have a chance of Masuto spawning, which you do not want to attack, and the Magister, which you can kill, but if you are going to be killing the Magister mini-boss for a free key of the crossing, you do want to kill his minions first, because they do stacked up damage, which is very annoying. And for this section right here, to open up the barrier, you only have to kill the 2 Necromancers we killed in the video. Just so you remember that. Here's a clip of the Magister fight in Elite Dungeon 3. It isn't really that hard. Make sure you aren't zerking though, especially when the minions are still alive, because you will get KO'd. From that point on, just kill the Necromancers to open up the barriers, and then jump down to section 3, or the final floor, before you get to the final boss, the Ambassador. Once you've jumped down, you do actually have a bank chest nearby if you do need to restock on supplies. The last floor up to the Ambassador is very short, but there's a lot of mini-bosses that can spawn that you can kill quite easily for some extra dungeoneering tokens, 5k a pop. Remember to switch to your Salve Amulet E for the skeletons, and keep in mind that these skeletons and crabs and zealots and stuff do hit very hard. So keep an eye on your HP when going through the final section, because they do hit hard, and if you're solo, you can get stacked out if you're not paying attention. Then once you've cleared everything, you have come to the final part of the Elite Dungeon, the final boss, Ambassador. Doing solo Ambassador is extremely hard, as you need a very good DPS rotation. This is a guide for everything, so group or solo, but I'm more focused and leading towards group Ambassador kills, so duo or trio. I'll be explaining what the things like smoke and spinners mean in a second. The attack rotation for phase 1 is a magic or melee auto attack. Then 5 auto attacks, smoke placement, 5 auto attacks, black holes, 5 auto attacks, smoke, 5 auto attacks, and then about a minute into the fight, unless Ambassador has reached 650k life points, he will use the spinners, or energy beam attack. If after one set of spinners your damage is good enough, and you get Ambassador down to 550k life points, phase 2 will begin, with a minion spawn. This is always a sign that you've made it to phase 2 if the minions are spawned by the Ambassador. All you then want to do is get Ambassador down to 400,000 life points to get into phase 3. Oh, and the Ambassador keeps using his smoke and black hole special attacks, or mechanics. Just so you know. Once you get him down to 400,000 life points, the third phase will begin, with a heal from Seiru. Once that has been done, Seiru will kill the minions. Once Ambassador turns your screen red and whitish, you will know that you are in the final phase with the Black Hands and Magic Barrage. These Black Hands slap the floor and spurt little white stuff towards the Ambassador, which heals him. You want to stand in between the white stuff and the hands where they slap down on the ground, so that Ambassador is not healed. Every 10 auto attacks, a Magic Barrage attack will be used on a player. It is random every time. It's a really simple special attack you can avoid by using Devotion and Mage Spray. More on that later though. Here's an overview of what you do with most of the mechanics in text format. I will now be covering how to counter them with a video example. If you have the smoke placement mechanic on you, you will see a blue bar above your head. Once that bar reaches 0, you will place the smoke wherever you are standing. You can easily bladed dive to the side and place it in the middle or other side of the arena, so that you do not have any issues with the smoke. If you're using magic or ranged, simply walk to the side or surge or escape. But if you're using melee with your bladed dive switch, you can keep attacking until the bar reaches around 1/3 of the bar, then bladed dive outwards. Be sure to not move when placing the smoke, because otherwise you will place 2 smoke areas. The next special is the Black Hole. This is very simple to counter. You have 1, 2 or 3 depending on your group size, and all you want to do is bladed dive or surge towards them and stun them using a stunning ability like Binding Shot, Impact, Backhand, Kick, etc. If you really need to, you can also use a stunning threshold like Asphyxiate or Destroy. Next up, we have the spinners. Now this is a very difficult mechanic and easily the hardest mechanic from the Ambassador fight, especially if you're not good at doing a lot of damage. Thankfully, I can explain it quite well using some top-down footage of my friend Slippy doing the Ambassador solo. The Ambassador will place 6 Sinister fragments. You want to be using Zerg or Metamorphosis, or just do as much damage as you can if you're really using ranged to kill these spinners as fast as you can, because the less spinners that are alive at the end of the mechanic, the easier it's going to be for you. Now if your minimap and screen are set to north, just like mine here, just click on your minimap's compass if you want to have it set to the north. You want to think of the Ambassador Arena like a pizza divided in just 4 pieces. Now the southeast piece is going to be the most important piece of your pizza, because when the Ambassador reaches 650k life points or the boss timer hits 1 minute, he will say your soul is but a candle, blah blah blah, burn like the ants you are, have a taste of his power or behold his glory, and then he will start spinning fire and spawn the Sinister fragments. Just before this happens, you want to have your Zerg ready or your Metamorphosis, or at least very high adrenaline or close to that, so that you can use your Zerg rotation, sip your adrenaline potion and do as much damage as you can against these spinners as possible. This is much easier in a group of 3 than it is to duo, and soloing is just very difficult, like said a lot of times. Double Surge, Bladed Dive, and Mobility abilities are extremely useful here, especially if you're using melee, because it's so much harder to attack the spinners with melee compared to using magic or range where you can run and keep attacking. You should be able to get at least 4 spinners down, otherwise you're going to have a lot of problems and you're going to need a lot of defensive and barricade and stuff to survive. So at most you can allow 1 or 2 Sinister fragments to go inside the Ambassador. Each of these fragments will result in a shockwave attack dealing up to 9,000 typeless damage. The only way to counter this is to use Resonance with your shield if you time it correctly just after the ranged attack, or if you want to be safe, use Debilitate and then use Reflect, equipping your shield. This is why you need a shield for the fight. If there's 2 spinners, you want to res the first one and time it correctly, and then use Debilitate and Reflect for the second one. If there's more, you might as well just restart the fight, just because it's going to be awful. And finally, in the third phase, if you do get called out, your name gets said by the Ambassador, it's also a green message in your chat box. You simply want to use Devotion and Mage Spray, and then you can switch back to range afterwards. If he calls you out a second time, Devotion will probably be on cooldown, and then you want to use Debilitate to negate the damage and still switch to magic just in case, and then switch back to ranged after the mechanic is over. Now that I've talked about the mechanics, let's go ahead and go over a full duo kill of the Ambassador, because I feel most comfortable doing duo. So what I usually do is use a Steel Titan for the Ambassador duo. If you're doing solo or you're new, you definitely want to be using a Beast of Burden, aka a Pack Yak, Spirit Terror Bird, War Tortoise, whatever you need to have extra food. You want to be praying range throughout the entire fight, except for the blue attacks that come towards you, which you can res if you want to, or just pray magic and use Devotion, or just pray magic and keep it at that, switch back to ranged after the hit has hit you. As you see, I just placed a smoke and we're just doing damage, and then the black hole spawn, which we do of course stun, and then just go back on the Ambassador. It's not really that difficult. What is annoying is when you do place your smoke and a black hole spawns really close to it and you Bladed Dive into the smoke, you take a massive hit, and it's just, you gotta watch out with that. So as soon as Ambassador starts spinning and the Sinister fragments spawn, I start attacking the fragments, and what's cool is every time you kill a fragment, your Bladed Dive ability does get reset, so you can easily Bladed Dive into the Sinister fragment for a huge amount of damage. In the video I did just Bladed Dive next to it, so I didn't do as much damage. Now in the video, 1 fragment was absorbed, so I just used Debilitate just to be safe in case I messed up my res, because if that does happen, you can lose your sign, and it's just really annoying. Something that is also very useful for this boss, especially if you're using melee, is that Scrimshaw Vampirism to save you some food, and it just makes it easier if you're using a Steel Titan instead of a Pack Yak. Also, you can see we hit the 550k life points threshold, which is kind of nice. So yeah, we got to the next phase, the minions spawn, and not too long after, Saru comes and goes ahead and heals us a bit. Saru then kills the minions, and as you can see, the color of the screen actually changes to red and white, and so we are in phase 3 with the black hand. If your DPS is good enough, you can ignore the white stuff, especially in duo or trio. Solo, you probably can't unless you're some kind of DPS god. But yeah, you just want to stand in between the hands, slapping down and shooting the white stuff to the Ambassador, because it heals the Ambassador and it can make the fight a lot longer. Every 10 auto attacks you have that massive hit, you want to Devotion and Magic Pray against. Unless you have it twice in a row, then you want to use Debilitate, of course, and Reflect. But if your partner gets called out instead of you, you can actually Zerg or use Sunshine to finish the Ambassador quicker. And there you go, the Ambassador has been killed, congratulations. If you're lucky, you get a Eldritch crossbow piece worth up to 300-400 mil. Or maybe a cheeky little pet. However, Elite Dungeons 3 is extremely good combat experience, being easily over 1 million experience per hour, and you make roughly 6 to 7 mil GP per hour if you can do 3 runs in an hour, maybe like 5 mil GP per hour from the trash mob, so it's really good money. And with that being said, this guide has come to an end. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please leave a like down below as I put a huge amount of time into making this guide, and maybe even consider subscribing if you're interested in more guides, PVM related, skill related, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.